Today we're back with Jeff Blankenburg. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. So last time you were on the show, about 5 minutes ago,
Right.
you showed off the features of this phone.
Right.
And right now I wanted to ask you about that over there, in that corner there.
That wallpaper? What's sad is that of all the phones you could take from me, this is the one I care about the most.
That's fine. I'll give it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of Sprint hardware. No, it's funny. We have all of these demo phones, and almost all of them are this LG Taylor. LG Pacific is the code name of this device. And this happens to be the one Samsung, I think, in the Midwest. This may be the only one of these. And all the LG devices that were developer prototypes, all the phones are supposed to have a 1 gigahertz processor minimum. All the LGs, though, the prototypes only have a 600 megahertz processor, which means they're a little, they're 2/3 of what they're supposed to be. Now, they're still good, but they're just a little slower than when you pull this one out. This is the Samsung Taylor. Again, neither of these phones will really exist, but this Taylor has the full gigahertz processor, the full RAM, the full everything. And so when you put stuff on this phone, after having used the other ones, this is like the most glorious experience ever. So cool. This is definitely the one that I like to keep around.
Right. Well, let's talk about Windows Phone from a developer's experience. Imagine for a second that I'm a guy that's never done any phone development before.
Okay, we'll make that stretch.
Which might be true. Step one, what do I need to get started? Do I need a phone to get started?
You do not need a phone. In fact, many people have yelled at me on Twitter and messaging and all sorts of stuff saying, if I don't have a phone, I'm not building an app. But you actually don't really need a phone to do any of the development. So if you go to developer.windowsphone.com, there's a big image there that says download the tools. And if you click on that, it'll give you a copy of Visual Studio 2010. It'll give you a copy of Expression Blend 4. It'll give you all the SDK, everything you need to develop applications, including an emulator. And with that emulator, you can do almost everything. The few things that don't emulate well, just out of the box, are accelerometer, GPS, and accelerometer and GPS. For
okay, so the accelerometer is what tells the orientation of the phone, whether it's this way or that way.
Yeah, correct.
The GPS tells where on the planet the phone is.
Correct. Okay. And accelerometer is much more than orientation change. It can recognize that the phone is spinning. It can recognize shakes. There's all sorts of gestures you can do. But you're correct. Yeah, that's what the accelerometer is for. And so Microsoft actually offers a .NET library called Reactive Extensions that allows you to emulate in the emulator GPS and accelerometer data, so that you don't have to have a phone in order to make those things happen. But I've actually, in the 5 or 6 months that I've been working with the phone, I've come across a ton of resources and a ton of people that are way smarter than me that have put together some amazing technologies that you can do to emulate those other two things, accelerometer and GPS. Specifically, the accelerometer is the one that most impressed me. One guy used a Nintendo Wii controller to do it, so instead you just wave it around and boom, you have accelerometer data just via Bluetooth. It's awesome. And another guy actually did a, what is it called? Augmented Reality. So you actually print out this little card that looks like a phone, just on your printer, any printer will do, and you hold it up in front of your webcam. And his software takes that webcam data, looks at what you're holding, and recognizes that you tilted it up or down or sideways or whatever, and feeds that data into your application. So I've been creating a big list of this, and you can, if you're adding resources to this link on the web or whatever, jeffblankenburg.com/WP7.
All right, well, let's talk about how do I get started now. I've downloaded the tools. There's something to install. I've got to install Visual Studio, Expression Blend, and then some libraries.
Yeah, well, actually, when all that stuff comes, it'll all just be baked in for you automatically.
Okay, so I just run an Xe. Everything's on my phone, on my laptop right now.
One download, one install, makes it all happen.
And then I want to get started. I launch Visual Studio. I say File, New
Project, and you'll actually get 5 choices. There's a Windows Phone standard project. There's one called a data application, which is an MVVM style implementation. We could spend a whole nother talk on what MVVM is, but basically it's a way to separate your data from your interface.
Okay, yeah, we had a show on that a while ago.
Okay, and then there's your standard Windows Phone class library, and then there's 2 other templates that are a panorama and a pivot control based template. But out of those 5 templates, most of the time you're just going to choose a standard phone template, and you just go from there. Start dragging and dropping controls on the page, and almost everything about it's event-driven, so you just subscribe to events on objects on your screen.
It's all Silverlight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just building XAML. I'm dropping things on. It's generating XAML for me.
Absolutely.
And I'm firing up events. There's got to be more than that.
No, it really is that simple. In fact, if you build applications in Silverlight 3, you could honestly copy and paste all of your XAML, all of your C#, drop it right into a Windows Phone template, and you're off and running.
Is there any difference between the Silverlight that I'm using to build a phone application and the Silverlight that I use to build Silverlight applications?
As long as we stay version compatible, right? The Silverlight that's on the phone is Silverlight 3,
and 4 is the
and
current
Silverlight
one.
4 is currently out for the web.
Okay.
If you stay Silverlight 3 compatible, absolutely, it's exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
There are a few small tweaks, but it's nothing significant. For example, we don't have access to the GPS accelerometer, all that stuff in Silverlight 3.
So they added a few.
So they added a couple
phone-specific
things there, but they also took a couple things away. One example would be there's an idea called a video brush, where I can actually take a video and instead of being the standard rectangle you see all over the web, but make it a circle or make it look like a paw print or whatever. You can't do a video brush on the phone.
Okay.
The one other limitation is you can only have one video at a time on your application. So in Silverlight, there's been demos of people taking 9 videos and spinning them around in 3D and doing all this stuff.
Silverlight 1 had too many of those.
Yeah, one video at a time
Okay.
on the phone. That's mostly to support battery life.
Okay, that makes sense. So I'm building essentially standard Silverlight application on my phone, but what do I need to keep in mind? What's different about the phone?
Well, you have a much smaller screen size, right? With the web, and this is one of the things that I always loved about web development, is that I have this huge canvas. If I want to make somebody scroll, I can make them scroll. With a phone, yes, we can make them scroll, but we're kind of limited to this. We've got this small screen size. It's 800 by 480, and that's generally what the screen size they're expected to operate within. So you really have to think about touch targets, how big, because you don't have a mouse, which is a pixel.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about a 45 pixel, 48 pixel finger that has to touch the screen. So there's a lot of little design elements like that. A standard Silverlight app, you might pack 8 or 10 checkboxes next to each other.
Right.
That doesn't work on the phone because the finger would tap more than one at a time.
Yeah, I heard you use the phrase authentic digital, I think it was?
Authentically digital.
Authentically digital, meaning
Yeah.
don't use analogies or metaphors.
Yeah, don't use
that-
real world
don't overuse
things.
them.
Right. And the real reason is because they want to try to avoid taking up space with just Chrome. Whether that's just borders on things or whether the example I used in the talk today was making everything look like a bookshelf. Well, that's perfectly fine, but that's good in a bookshelf. Make this act like a phone.
So Microsoft Bob would not be worked well
No,
on the phone.
I don't think Microsoft Bob worked well on anything.
I use it. I still use it.
It's a solid operating
Right,
system.
That's not true. What about resources? You mentioned that you were compiling a list of resources.
Yes.
Is that the first place where you go to Blankenburg.com?
It actually wouldn't be a bad place to start. But another great place to go would be developer.windowsphone.com.
Okay.
And on there they do have a list of resources, but it's all Microsoft created resources, right? So they're gonna have stuff for you there, and there's a lot of good stuff, but it's all stuff that was created by and for Microsoft. The list that I'm compiling is by the community for the community, right? So there's just guys that created this one cool thing. They may never do anything else with it, but this is awesome. The one example I used was the bar napkin templates. So a guy created a bunch of PDFs that have the frame of a phone on it, so you can just print it out and draw your application on a piece of paper. It's an absolutely invaluable tool when you're trying to sketch out an application.
Okay. Now, I know you were proficient at Silverlight before you started even thinking about Windows Phone 7. Do you recommend for someone that doesn't know Silverlight, should they take a step back, learn Silverlight first,
Absolutely.
and then learn the phone?
Yes. The way I look at it is a Silverlight developer is always going to be more valuable than just a phone developer. The reason for that being, if you know the phone, you should also know how to deploy stuff for the Silverlight for the web and things like that. One recommendation I always make is when you're searching for things, how do I do this on Windows Phone? It's much easier to say, how do I do this in Silverlight? You're going to find many, many more resources, many more tutorials, all sorts of information on Silverlight. But if you only put Windows Phone in your search, you're limiting yourself to what people have done on the phone, which is far less content. The same is true with jobs. If you're looking for jobs, there's a huge increase in people that are looking for people with Silverlight abilities. Windows Phone is going to be a lesser thing. So it's very, very important to be able to put Silverlight on your resume.
Okay, where does XNA fit into this?
Well, yeah, I guess all we really talked about so far is Silverlight. There's two flavors of applications you can build. One is Silverlight, one is XNA. If you're not familiar with XNA, the basic concept behind it is it's the technology that you were able to build applications for the Zoom HD, the technology you were able to build apps for the Xbox 360, and now it's also a technology that you can leverage on Windows Phone as well. In fact, your code is compatible across those three platforms. So if you build an XNA, well, I take that back, the Zoom isn't, but you can go across the PC, the Xbox, and the phone using XNA 4. The main difference I find is that if you're building line of business apps or something that just has a lot of data, Silverlight is going to be your best bet as far as speed to market, things like that. If you're building something that leverages a lot of graphical intensive kind of things, or you want to do massive 3D rendering, that's where XNA excels. So where you'll often hear people say is XNA is for games, Silverlight is for apps. I always say Silverlight is for apps and games, XNA is for games and apps, right? And that's the primary.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. But you could use either for either.
Okay. So if you use XNA, you don't need to use Silverlight.
You can't. It's one or the other. It's a choice you make as you're building your application.
Anything else you tell us?
About the phone or about
the phone, about developing the phone, and advice for
Silverlight. Writing apps for the phone has been one of the most fun experiences that I've had as a developer in a while. Like I said, I've been a web developer for quite some time, and I've absolutely loved it. But putting stuff on this phone and just seeing it come to life so quickly, being able to knock an application out like Tapscotch that I showed you briefly, I built that in 3 hours. And it's probably a game that I'll probably make some money from. I think it's good enough that I can probably sell it in the marketplace and make some decent income from it.
Is it out there now?
It's not yet, but the marketplace, I don't think I'll get my app up there until about November 4th.
Okay.
And the phones come out on the 8th. So
phones will be available on the 8th in AT&T stores.
Yes.
Okay.
So it'll be there soon, but I still need to add a few more levels and add some trial modes and stuff like that to it.
All right, very cool. The phones will be available on November 8th.
Yes.
Here's an example of one. But this one, actually, this is just a prototype, right?
It is a prototype.
Okay.
The Samsung that's coming out is way cooler.
Way cooler, okay.
Yeah, the Samsung Focus, I think is what
Okay,
it's called.
I'm not sure this video might not be released until. Let's see if we can get it out like that week. That'd be nice.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Jeff, thank you so much.
Certainly.
Appreciate your time.
No problem. With this kind of technology, who needs friends?